Since Hal Jordan's return, little in the way of his last year as a Green Lantern has come back to haunt him. Mongul, the cyborg Superman, and the Green Lanterns he left for dead have remained largely silent. Of course, it can't remain that way for long. Welcome to Revenge of the Green Lanterns.
Turn up the lights in here, baby. Extra bright, I want y'all to see this. Turn up the lights in here, baby. You know what I need. Want you to see everything. Want you to see all of the lights.
I have a confession to make with this review. In my No Fear review, I scripted a review after having read the collection I was reviewing, and it was only in assembling the review that I had to resort to using scans of the issues themselves, resulting in a few missed items. In this case, I was unable to get to the collection in time, so I'm relying on Wikipedia to inform me as to which issues are actually in it. As a result, any pages added or removed for the collection are completely ignored for the purposes of this review. We start off with our first arc, the 2 issues that make up A Perfect Life. This introduces Mongul, who was originally conceived as a Superman villain, into his guise as a Green Lantern villain. Mongul is not completely new to Green Lantern, of course. His role in both the destruction of Coast City and A New Dawn both had a major impact, but here we are literally introduced to a new Mongul, his son, who will come to plague our respective corps for years down the line. Mongul has come to Earth, seeking to avenge his father by carrying out his last mission, the conquering of the planet. He starts by introducing us to Black Mercy, a plant which is able to influence the minds of those it feeds off of. He starts off with cows, because all alien invaders know that they are the true ever-vigilant defense force, before Green Lantern Hal Jordan and Green Arrow come and find first the cows, then Mongul. Hal and Green Arrow had been involved in a discussion of Hal's personal life, which Hal claims is perfect despite never having time for a family that he keeps promising to spend time with, when Hal's partner John Stewart calls him. Apparently the Justice League's watchtower was blown apart, and in the aftermath Mongul stops by to steal something, escaping Superman and Wonder Woman in the process. Even Hal is incredulous at this. Is it so hard to ask for those editorial references we used to get in ongoing comics? The two discover some farmers that are entranced the same way as the cows before Mongul reveals himself. The 3 fight for a bit before Mongul uses the Black Mercies to ensnare Hal and Ollie, putting them into a Paradise Illusion prison, proving that Hal's life is not perfect due to the losses he has been through. Ollie, the Green Arrow, causes a glamour fail when he realizes he's seeing the life that his friend Hal wished for him, rather than a life he would envision for himself.
Look, my family's finally all together. Huh? Wait a minute. What's happening? Don't go! Patamon, do something! I want them to stay!
It's not real!
Wait a second. They weren't here at all. Malomyotismon, you're gonna pay. There you are, dude! Davis? So are you ready to help me?
Ollie wakes Hal out of his stupor, and the two rush off to face Mongul, who is joined by his sister. Mongul and Mongal, yes, that's her name, aren't exactly the Mason twins from Feed, and would be fighting for sole rights for the Mongul name if they weren't interrupted by some Earthlings to beat. Green Lantern and Green Arrow use the portal the twins arrived in to send them back home, where Mongul decides that it would be too confusing for readers for 2 Mongols, or, Greenlight forbid, a female Mongol, so he decapitates his sister with 1 punch. Guess she really wasn't cut out for the Mongol family. Also, I don't know what's more ridiculous about that depiction. While it's largely filler and none too subtle character exposition in the grand scheme of things, A Perfect Life does fill the purpose of bringing the new Mongol into Green Lantern, setting the stage for several appearances over the coming years in Green Lantern Corps. Following A Perfect Life, we get a one-shot issue about the Tattooed Man. No, not that Tattooed Man, but that's the point. In No Fear, Jeff Johns got to retcon the Shark, Hector Hammond, Manhunters, and Black Hand. Now, he takes his hand at remaking the Tattooed Man, a rehabilitated enemy of Hal's, by making a new Tattooed Man. Also, fan service. The cover of this issue really tells you the whole point of this crossover. Don't worry, the comic doesn't explain why Hal feels the need to let Batman try on the ring. Maybe he's considering retirement? Finally, we get to the titular story arc. Revenge of the Green Lanterns prides itself on being 1 year later, giving ample time for Green Lantern Corps recharge and a few other events to take place. I suppose comics have to do this every once in a while when a 6-issue arc takes place over a period of 24 hours, but it can be baffling with continuity. Of course, the real reason for this is explained in the introduction to the story, because this isn't a comic about POW prisons. Everything leading up to Tomar 2's arrival, the battle with Rocket Reds and the Bounty Hunter, the presentation of the medals, and even Arkillo's first appearance, would have worked a lot better as part of the following volume, Wanted, Hal Jordan. As a single, ongoing story told in a monthly form, this works well, but as a kickoff to a story arc, it seems out of place, especially as somebody who's read the following volume, which could have benefited from both the one-page introduction to the Yellow Rings and the presentation ceremony. Regardless, things take a turn in a whole different direction when Tomar 2, believed deceased Green Lantern of Sector 2813 and last seen in Emerald Twilight, crashes, intent on killing Hal Jordan for what he did years ago. After being attacked by a Green Lantern version of Doomsday, Hal goes to the Guardians, knowing in his heart what he must do to do the right thing. The Guardians, of course, are not quite so sure about this heart thing. Naturally, Hal and Guy Gardner go off to find the missing lanterns. This brings them outside the known universe, as defined by the Guardians, to Bayat, home of the resurgent Manhunters. Hal and Guy find the missing lanterns, but not before having it out with Manhunters on a 2-page spread and having most of the power drained out of their rings by the Manhunters' power battery faces. Hal tries to introduce Guy and the readers to Lyra, daughter of a renegade Green Lantern, Intergalactic General Kreon, Kilowog's assistant Kay-Han, Jack T. Chance, Graf Torin, Hanu, who almost never uses his ring, and centuries-old Boudica, but is interrupted by an old enemy, Mongol's partner in the destruction of Cloud City and Parallax's target for much of his career, the Cyborg Superman. As is required by an obscure California law, the Cyborg's appearance was followed immediately by his origin story. He then reveals himself not only the new Grandmaster of the Manhunters thanks to Parallax no longer hunting him, but also possessor of enough rings to pose in a parody of one of the Emerald Twilight covers. After another short fight, the Cyborg hooks Jordan up to become a living battery for the Manhunters, much like the dozens of lanterns he already has in his clutches. Using the tremendous willpower that makes him the strongest of the Green Lanterns, Hal defeats the nanites intended to take his mind prisoner before freeing the captured lanterns in an exposition montage. This is a great scene, though the narration gets a bit contrived at times, and it lacks the reimagining of Emerald Twilight that earlier scenes gave me hope for. The Lost Lanterns, unaware of the passage of time, take up the last fight they remember, the one against Hal Jordan. Hal refuses to fight back, and they stop only as they realize they are far from the only Lost Lanterns that made their way onto Bayat. Among their fellows is Arisha, Hal's former lover, who remains sexy despite the respectful art style of the series. They fight their way through an excellent sequence in which Guy Gardner is made the power source for a prototypical Manhunter capable of destroying entire planets. Boudica tells Hal that she and him will never be anything but enemies, before Guy is freed and a huge chunk is blown out of the side of Bayat as lanterns escape. The action of this story is really more suited to an issue of Green Lantern Corps than the main Green Lantern series, but that's not a downside in this case, as it's compelling and well drawn. Understanding that selling comics is more important than enforcing their will, the Guardians submit to the fact that Guy claims he authorized the mission with his authority as a member of the Honor Guard, shielding Hal from trouble. Kay-Han stops Hal one last time once they're out of the line of fire. Recognizing the efforts Hal made, Kay-Han claims the Lost Lanterns will leave Hal alone, as long as he stays out of their way. Guy, on the other hand, has a suitable punishment handed to him. He gets to be part of the detail keeping an artificial sun going so that Superboy Prime cannot escape. When you look through this volume, between Mongol, Cyborg Superman, and Superboy Prime, it's clear that part of Johns' plan to catapult Green Lantern to the forefront of DC Comics is to steal all of Superman's villains, taking the diminishing power left over from Superman's own death and resurrection and applying it to Hal Jordan's. This is a great step for the Green Lantern mythos, returning what was lost to the franchise while honoring the sacrifices made by Emerald Twilight. The only thing missing was Ivan Reis's interpretation of the original saga's lackluster artwork. It sets up a ton of characters that would come to populate the Green Lantern Corps comics, and introduces us to enemies that will play a large role in the events to come in the two series.